In this video, I'm going to answer a lot of questions like which note to go to next, how to make melodies, how to create chords, what are scales, what are modes. If you don't mind the cars riding by in the background, this video is for you. So hello and welcome to BusyWorksBeats.com. If you're new here, I'm Game from BusyWorks Beats. We trained over 1 million producers around the world. Some have gone to work with Drake, Kanye West, Post Malone, Ariana Grande, French Montana, Young Thug, J. Cole, Trippie Redd, YG, Young Thug, if I didn't already say that, Ray Shremmer, and I'm starting to repeat myself because it's just so many people, Polo G, on and on and on. Okay, so today we're going to focus on just understanding notes, chords, and scales. So I used to tell myself this lie all the time. You don't need music theory. Technically, it's true, but technically, it's also a lie at the same time. Because in the beginning, I would just kind of go based off of what my brain said, and I would just type in the notes. The problem is our brains can hear harmony, but if you can't understand what makes up a chord or what makes something a little more complex than just one note, it's hard to draw that in if you don't know music theory. Okay, so firstly, what we're going to cover are notes. Why notes? Because when you get the gist of how to move through notes, you could pretty much do anything with your music and your melodies. This is going to sound simple. I don't want you to tune out just yet, but notes are important. So what we're going to call these are intervals. Intervals are just distances between notes. Why is this important? It's because the old definition of a chord used to be 2 notes or more, not 3 notes. That's a newer definition to a chord. So if you had 2 people singing, one person would do the top line harmony, another person would do like a contrast harmony, and they would combine to create this unique experience in folk music. So when it comes to music theory and music production, 2 notes actually make a chord. You see this all the time. So for example, if we add F, we're going to get that yeet type sound. Now I'm using a piano, so this is going to have a piano sound. Okay, now my ear goes dun, but now I know exactly using what's called chordal harmony. Okay, so now we just made a yeet melody. You don't need to know, you could do that by ear partially, but to get this whole full sound, it's music theory. It's basic music theory, chordal harmony, quintal harmony. So this section here, these are called intervals. The distance from C to F is called a perfect fourth. So if you're struggling to understand notes, there's really 3 notes you need to understand. I'm going to close my eyes, I'm going to pick a note. Okay, this is D sharp. You don't need to even know what that note is. If you count up 5 semitones, you're going to reach what's called the perfect fourth. Okay, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These always harmonize. It doesn't matter where you are. You could even grab this perfect fourth, pull it down an octave. You now have what's called a perfect fifth. So for those who study traditional music theory, you have the circle of fifths. This is basically where it comes from. It's a fourth going up, it's a fifth going down. Now, what can you do with this knowledge? You're like, okay, I could stack 2 notes. That's not what I want to do. But let's say you want to create a melody or a bass line out of this same approach. What you could do is you can count up 7 notes, which is a fifth, a perfect fifth. It's called perfect because it always harmonizes. I'm running out of breath. I need y'all to smash the like button because there's going to be a lot of explanation here. So grab this note, count up 7 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That is now called your perfect fifth. What you can do is continue to keep doing this. So let's count more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You now have a melody based off of simple math. Yes, music theory is this simple. And no, it won't box you in a box to where you can't come up with cool melodies. So let's make this sound cooler just by dragging these notes out. Okay. And then let's do. Now, the cool thing is you could just hit shift and copy this over and transpose, it's called, moving those notes around without redoing the same voicing because this always works. Now you have a melody based off of a simple perfect fifth. Perfect fifth. You could do the same thing with bass. So let's say I pull this down. Okay, now we're getting different moods based on how I voice these notes. Okay, so now all we have to do is just pull these down. And now you have a cool melody. So that's the importance of understanding notes and intervals. Intervals, there's a lot of intervals. I'm not going to go into too much depth here because I don't want to scare you guys with too much information. But also, you don't need to memorize intervals. You just need to understand that intervals are what make up chords, and intervals are what create melodies. So to give you guys a quick, just run through. Okay, you have the tonic. This is usually the root note, the bottom note. Then you have a half step up. Half step is when you go from one note above or one note below, one half step. Okay, so this is going to give you your minor second. You don't need to memorize these. 2 notes away is called a major second. So we use these for a suspenseful sound. So you would stack this with what's called the fifth. Okay, you can grab this and you create like a Meek Mill type vibe. Okay, so that's how you would get that vibe. This major second here. Okay, so moving into what's called the minor third. This is 3 notes away. And I'm showing you this because this is what's going to build most of the chords that you use is this minor third. 4 notes up is called a major third. It's called the third because if we map out what are called scales, let's quickly talk about scales, not to go too deep into scales just yet. So all the white notes starting from C is the C major scale. Okay, so the first note is the first scale degree. The second note is the second scale degree. The third note is, guess what? The third scale degree. Okay, so that's called the major third because this is a major scale, and that's the third note of a major scale. So it's called the major third for that reason. Next, we have what's called the perfect fourth, and this is the perfect fourth no matter which scale you're in. It always is the perfect fourth. It's 5 notes away from your bottom note. Now, the cool note here is a tritone. This is when you get into passing chords, borrowed chords, transitioning from one chord to the next. You could use what's called a tritone. It was banned in church. Okay, so that's how they thought it was demonic. But in reality, this is one of the strongest intervals that wants to resolve back down to the tonic. So you've heard this in Snoop Dogg's. Let me get the rhythm right. Let me get the actual BPM. This is worth it. So you've heard this before? I feel like that's not. Let's change the snap to grid, zoom in. This is so me being particular. Okay. You've heard this. Simple tritone. Okay, we're going from the root note to the tritone, which is 6 semitones up, and then back to the root note. So this is a great note to go outside the key and really pull people away from your song and then slap them back in. This tritone is important because this is what builds up what's called the diminished chord. And diminished chords are also a part of what's called dominant 7th chords and dominant 9th chords. And those strong chords are because of that tritone. So that's how powerful this music theory stuff can go. Now, if you want to learn more and you really want to dig deeper, this is just surface level stuff for YouTube. I can't go deeper on YouTube. The video would be 10 hours long. There's no way I can do this all in one video. Just go to busyworksbeats.com/premium because you could get started today for free. There's free courses. You could start the trial for free for the paid courses. You get 14 days for free if you want to jump into the paid stuff. And you can start for free so that you can see behind the curtain and learn right away without worrying about a bill. Okay, so next, let's move into where are we at? We started here. This is the 6 semitones up. Let's go 7 semitones up. This is called the perfect fifth. And the perfect fifth always harmonizes. In short, when you hear about the fifth of a scale wants to go down to the tonic, okay, that's because it just resolves. This is a perfect harmony that wants to come back down to C. Okay, so that's called the perfect fifth. Now, 8 semitones up. This is where we get into, I think about these. Let me just share how I think about these notes. These are beginning to become colored tones because if you really pull this down, it's only 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 notes away. So really, it's a major third up an octave. So I'm starting to think about sounds differently than I do when we get into, So what I'm saying is, for those who are more advanced and understand what I'm saying, is that once we go up to 6, That's as far as we can go as far as the difference between notes. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or I meant 8. Whoops, where are we at here? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's the furthest distance, because if I go back to C, it's 6 notes the other way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The moment I raise this note, it becomes less than 6 notes away. So 6 notes is the furthest away that you can go from the tonic. So the moment you start going into these other notes, I look at these more like colors, because really what they are is just variations of the things that we already have, like the major third, for example. So that the 8 semitones away, I really think of it as a major third just raised up. That's pivotal for your augmented chord. Then we have 9 semitones up. This is your major sixth. You don't need to memorize these. Then you have 10 semitones up, which is your minor seventh. Okay, and then you have 11 semitones up, which is your major seventh, and then back to unison, which is an octave up. Okay, you don't need to memorize all that. The point is, if you want to jump into like the deeper understandings, just understand that the maximum distance between 2 notes is really just 6 semitones. Everything else is a variation of that, of the other tones. Okay, so that's a more advanced technique from this basic type stuff. So now that we understand notes and how powerful they are, let's talk about chords. So where do chords come from? I am going to teach the old way, but I'm also going to show you a shortcut to chords. So a scale is just notes that go in a sequence that sound good. There's a lot of different scales. There's pentatonic, hexatonic, diatonic. We don't need to get into all the different types of scales. There's too many. Okay, there's just plainly too many. So what we're going to do is focus on the major and minor scale. This is called a major scale when we start at C, which is all the white notes starting from C. This is called the major scale. What we can do is skip every other note within this scale. So remember, C major is all the white notes. Once you map all the white notes out, then you could apply this technique, which is to take a note, skip the next note, take a note, skip that next note, skip, and then you make these chords. Let's pull this down an octave. Okay, and that's how you build chords. You just skip the notes in the scale. Pretty simple. Now that is the simplistic way of going about chords. Once you get into deeper understandings about music theory and jazz theory, which I teach at busyworksbeats.com/music theory magic, it goes way deeper, because now we're talking about chord extensions, and chord extensions are important because this creates the jazz genre. So if I kept skipping notes, go from B, skip C, go to D, this is called the 9th chord. If I skip E, go to F, now we're at the 11th chord. Now this sounds quote unquote bad because of this diminished, and I just don't have time to go through everything right now, but this diminished chord is the reason why this sounds off. Diminished chords usually are used to transition from one chord to the next, and it's more used for like a dominant approach. What we can do is alter this so it doesn't sound so jarring. Once you get into major 11ths, I don't like it because of this sound. So we could either sharpen a note, which is to raise a note, or flatten a note, which is to pull it down. So in this case, I want to change one of these notes and I'm going to pull them either up or down, or I could pull multiple notes up and down. I think sharpening that, what's called the 11th, sounds good. Now it doesn't sound so jarring. Okay, so that's how I would what's called voice this chord. So voicing is how do we play these notes? Okay, do we play them all together? Do we play them straight out? So that's where it becomes a little more esoteric. You can also omit notes, which is to remove a note from a chord. In short, the 3rd and the 7th identify the chord type. Okay, so how do we get these notes, the 3rd and the 7th? This is the 1st scale degree, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. Okay, then 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th. But remember, we raised that 11th up to make it what's called a sharp 11th. Okay, so that 11th is up 1 in this case. So that's where we're getting these names from, 9th, 7th, and all that. It's because we're counting up the scale degrees. Okay, so what you can do is you can either omit the 7th or the 3rd. It's basically the same thing. Why? It's because this structure here is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is called a major third. It's the same exact distance from here to here, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we can get rid of these because these are literally the same thing. And if you count again, it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's really just stacking up major third intervals. So if I collapse these, they all have the same distance between the notes. So really, we're playing the same exact distance between the notes. The only thing is, how do we space them apart from each other? We space them apart by a minor third, 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's how we're spacing them apart from each other. Okay, in this case, with the sharp 11, you don't need to know what all that means. The point is that chords are a lot more simple than you think, and chords are built off of intervals. Okay, so I just showed you how to build a chord in seconds. Now I'm gonna show you how to build a chord even faster using what are called chord codes. I teach this at busyworksbeats.com/music theory because I want people to understand that you don't need to memorize scales to get into music theory. I know you're taught that as a musician because you play an instrument, but as a music producer in 2024, you do not need to memorize scales. It's great to know scales. You don't need to memorize the scales though to get started. So firstly, without using any tools and MIDI controls and secret tools, we're just going to click anywhere. I'm going to close my eyes and pick a random note. I just happen to land on B. You don't even need to know what this note means or what it is. What we can do is build out the DNA of a chord. So every chord has a certain DNA. You know, minor chords have 0, 3, 7 as their DNA. So if I wanted to make B minor, regardless of what key I'm in, just to not distract you guys, I'm going to delete all those notes to the right. Let's say I want to make B minor. I'm going to take this B note and I'm going to count. So wherever I land is called the 0 point, the point of rest, the point that has no distance. It's called the 0 point. All I have to do is count up my keyboard to finish out this chord code. So it's 0, 3, 7. So this is 0, then count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is great even as a musician because now you can go on your keyboard and quickly say, okay, I want to make a minor ninth chord. I'm going to close my eyes, pick a note. I just happen to land at G. So I'm going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And now I have a minor ninth chord just like that. And now I can learn new chords and then get it in my muscle memory. So it's not to be a crutch. It's really to get you through different areas in your music. And now we have here B minor. Okay, we talked about voicing, but let's revoice this and pull down what's called that top note. Okay, so it's the second inversion because we're moving the bottom two notes technically up an octave. Boom. So that's called the second inversion. The first inversion is taking that bottom note, pulling it up an octave. So you get different voicing, it's called. Okay, so Scott Storch is known to do different voicings like this to make his chords sound more full without making the chords complex. Okay, so I showed you guys that in a different video. So let's keep moving about chords. Is when it comes to chords, every chord is DNA. So a minor chord is 0, 3, 7. A major chord is 0, 4, 7. And the difference would be simply one note. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's a minor chord. Now what separates a minor chord from a major chord? One note, the third. So in this case, the major is one note away. It's 0, 4, 7, whereas the minor is 0, 3, 7. Okay, so you'll start understanding chords on a deeper level. Once you get into understanding chord codes. If you want the chord code chart for free, just go to busyworksbeats.com/music theory. Okay, so what we're going to get into again is different chord types. I'm not going to bore you guys with too many chords, but one major thing you need to understand is a 2-5-1 chord progression. Now, why am I calling it 2-5-1? Technically, it should be called second, fifth, first, but people get a little bit lazy. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the first scale degree, meaning the first note of this scale. Then we're going to go to the second note of the scale, then the third note of the scale, fourth note of the scale, fifth note of the scale, sixth note of the scale, seventh note, and then back to the beginning. So when I say second, okay, we're going to the second note in the scale. And to build the chord type, what you have to do is skip every other note. So you're going to go from D, skip E, go to F, skip G, go to A. Okay, so that's going to build our first chord type. This is called the second scale degree. In this case, it's a minor chord. How do we know it's a minor chord? Not because of the scale type, but because of the chord DNA that I talked about. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That always makes a minor chord no matter what. So that's how you can start identifying chords using chord codes. Let's continue. And what we're going to do is actually extend this chord to a ninth chord to make it sound a little more jazz-like. So let's keep skipping those notes. So it's D. Don't mind the helicopter in the background, yo. I got the window open and it's just a nice day today. So D, skip E, go to F, skip G, go to A, skip B, go to C, skip D, go to E. That's our ninth chord right here. Okay, and then that's the second scale degree. Now let's go to the fifth scale degree. This is called the dominant chord. It's called dominant because it wants to dominate the sound and pull it back down to what's called the tonic or the root note. So here we have G. We're going to skip every other note, G to B, and then skip C, go to D, skip E, go to F. Here's where we get into what are called dominant chords when you have, I'm just going a little fast here because this is not, you don't need to memorize this. But once we start adding this diminished chord inside of the chord, it becomes a different chord type. So let's count this out. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a major third. 5, 6, 7. That's a major triad. 8, 9, 10. Now this 10, if you refer back to what I taught you guys earlier, this is a minor seventh. So we're actually combining two different chords, a minor seventh and a major chord. So when you combine those two, you actually create, on top, it's called a diminished chord. So you have a dominant seventh chord. That's what this is called. Now what we can do is extend this even further to make this a dominant ninth chord. So we can skip G, go to A. And then lastly, again, the fifth usually wants to come down to the tonic. So you're going to see this chord progression in so many genres. You need to know this chord progression. Now we're going to go to C, which is the first. Skip every other note within the scale to start mapping out this chord type. Now I want a ninth chord, so I need to extend it all the way up to the note D. So it's C, E, G, in this case, C, E, G, B, and then D. Now that sounds very bland and boring. Okay, so what we want to do here is, this is where advanced music theory comes into play. This is what I teach at busyworksbeats.com/premium. Okay, so for example, if you hit shift down 6 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, this is called a tritone substitution. Now we're getting that Tyler, the Creator type vibe. And you could do what's called alter these notes to make it sound even more R&B. You see me do this a million times, sharpen the 5 and the ninth. Fifth and the ninth, getting tongue twisted. Okay, so you can do a lot with chords. That's why harmony, once you understand harmony, you can pretty much get into almost anything. Now let's talk about different scales. So scales are different combinations of notes that sound good. So there's a major scale, a minor scale. We're not going to get into all the scales because we just don't have time in this video. So if you start at C, count up all the white notes, this is your major scale. It's also called the Ionian mode. It used to be called Ionian, and then they're like, okay, we need to speak English, so they call it the major scale. To get the relative minor scale, all we have to do is go from a major scale, the tonic, and count down 3 notes, 1, 2, 3. So it's the same exact notes, just starting down 3 notes, 1, 2, 3. That's your relative minor scale. Relative meaning these two can go back and forth and sound good and cohesive. Okay, so that is the relative minor scale. So you have a major and a minor scale out of the same exact notes. Now, modes are basically different starting points within these scales. That's more advanced, and we'll teach you that at busyworksbeats.com/premium. So for now, what I'm going to focus on is this major moving into the minor scale, and I'll show you how to apply this. So we're going to use 2-5-1 a lot. 2-5-1 is going to help us resolve down to what's called a tonic. Now we're getting into advanced territory, so just bear with me. So we're going to do 1-4-5-1 in the C major scale. Let's map out a nice chord here. So 1-4, what's the fourth? The fourth scale degree is first, second, third, fourth. That starts at F. And then we could just copy this because it's F major. And then we're going to go to what's called the dominant chord. So in this case, I'm going to use a chord stamp. So this is a lot faster here. We don't have to map that out. So with G dominant, and then we're going to come back down to C. That's called the first, the fourth, the fifth, and then the first, because of the starting notes at the bottom here and the chords that we mapped out. Now that's a very basic voicing. We'll change that up over time. So how can we go from this structure to the A natural minor structure? What we can do is go from the dominant chord, and instead of going down to C major, we can go down to A minor. Why? Because A minor has pretty much the same exact notes as C major, except you're adding A. So this is why it sounds good. So what we could do is called deceptive cadence, going from this dominant chord all the way down to A. Okay, so that people expect to hear C major, but then you land on A natural minor. That's one way to go from one key to the next. But what you could do is get a little more advanced here and revoice these chords 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's your tritone substitution. You could also start doing inversions. Like right here, this chord is like too active. So let's pull it down. Okay, and then you can even alter the chords of this dominant chord. Okay, so let's do a little more advanced techniques. Let's pull these notes down an octave. Now, the way I would go from this 1, 4, 5, 1 is I would use the dominant chord of the A natural minor scale. So let's swap out those last two chords. Let's go to the fifth note in this scale. So it's got the first, second, third, fourth, fifth. And let's do the same exact chord type. This is called a secondary dominant. When you're resolving down to the tonic of a different scale, you can use their dominant chord out of that scale to resolve down to what's called the tonic of that scale. This sounds more complicated than what it is, but instead of using G, which is the dominant chord before, we're going to use E because that's the fifth of A. So instead of going from the C major scale to the A natural minor scales, from that C major scales dominant to the A natural minor scales tonic, we're going to go from the A natural minor scales dominant chord down to the A natural tonic. This should have a better resolution here. And then again, you could use tritone substitution, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Why does this work so well? It's because these half steps. You're going down one note at a time, and that sounds very jazz-like. Half steps like to resolve down a half step. Now, doesn't that sound more cohesive than when we had the dominant chord from the C major scale? Even now, we could take this fifth and ninth and change up the voicing. So it depends on the vibe that you're going for. So now that you have this voicing, you could even pull these notes. Now remember, everything is playing at the highest velocity, so we want to humanize this. And again, even this chord we could revoice by moving that fifth down. We could take the root notes here, pull them down. And now it has a little more soul to it than just that bland sound it had before. Okay, so if you're going into melody, for example, now I'm going to wrap this video at this point because now we're getting into more advanced techniques. But if you wanted to add melody or top line, this is where you add those color notes, those chord extensions that go beyond that tritone. So here we're going to get into basically an octave higher is a good place to start. Or actually, I think we started, where do we start? C major. Here's a little cheat sheet you guys could use. You could use what's called the pentatonic scale. If you're in FL Studio, you could right click this icon and you could go to the major pentatonic or the minor pentatonic. If you're starting in a major key, it's probably best you use the major pentatonic. And the notes always work. So now you have a melody over top of your track, just like that. We're going to cut this video short because we're already into like probably 30 minutes of this video. Go to busyworksbeats.com/premium. And again, you can start completely for free. We have free courses, and you could also start the paid courses with a free trial, 14-day free trial. Super easy to get started. Just go to busyworksbeats.com/premium. Peace.